Okay, thank you, Liz. And hey, thank you to the Ice House for doing these webinars. A really great initiative. And I think we all need as much help as we can at the moment. So look, I'm Lee Maddox, and we've got Greg, my business partner, on the call. Greg's going to come in at Q&A time. He's a specialist in the really tricky questions, aren't you, Greg?
Right.
Look, we're a 10-person chartered accounting firm based in Parnell, Auckland. And we feel really privileged at the moment to be working super closely with our clients to be helping them through what are undoubtedly incredibly challenging times. We're not technically an essential service, so we're all working from home. We're doing our very best to be fully operational, but sharing many of the same challenges that you do. We're starting to use Zoom for all of our meetings, of course. It's the first time we've done a webinar of this scale. Great, we've got 259 people I can see at the moment. My biggest challenge just leading up to this is my neighbour. I had one of them doing some DIY and the other just started up a lawnmower. So we managed to get them to hold that off, and hopefully it's nice and quiet in the background during this. Look, the purpose of this was really for us to give you some advice from our perspective and some steps we believe you can take to help you navigate through this crisis. We'll tell you what we're seeing and hearing, and we've got what we think is a framework based on some of the things that we've seen that we believe will work to help our clients now and over the coming weeks, and we'll adapt our approach as things change. This isn't detailed financial advice, and obviously that does need to happen on a one-to-one advice. What I would say is now's the time to bring your advisors closer. Talk to your lawyers, your mortgage brokers, your bankers, your insurance brokers, your HR advisors. Some of you will have been on the other webinars. Bring your advisors in closer. Many are now giving advice at no charge. At the very, very least, you need to be talking to your accountant now. So look, I'll share the screen shortly, but I'll put that off as long as I can because I'm conscious that you then lose some of the video. So what we'll kick off with is our perspective on the current situation based on what we're seeing and hearing from our clients. Some immediate things you need to be considering, and I know many of you are already working on these things. In that, we'll touch on the government subsidy, this government support package, and in particular that wage subsidy, getting lots of questions there. What things you need to consider in the short term to preserve cash, to enable you to buy time to make some longer term decisions. Some things you need to do to help plan to maximize your chances of coming out of this well over the longer term as demand does return. And there will be a new normal post COVID-19. You do need to consider that. And maybe that's not something for today, but we'll talk about that and potentially some questions that you could pose to yourselves. So look, I will just share the screen now and hopefully you'll be able to see this. So we've covered that and we've covered the agenda. So really talking about our perspective on the current situation, well, look, it goes without saying it has no precedent. Everyone is at risk. Not everyone's going to be impacted by the same degree. Some households and businesses will be fine. Others will be really, and unfortunately, will be really devastated. We all hope collectively that the strong action the government's taken does help limit the impact of COVID-19. What we preach to our clients is hope is not a strategy. We really need to plan. Beyond the immediate health and social impacts, we are likely to see the biggest economic shock of our lifetimes, and things aren't going to fire up again at a flick of a switch. And so if we look to the global financial crisis, we saw some countries rebound strongly with a kind of a V shape where they got back to their pre-GFC growth rates really quickly, but it's possible this could be a much more protracted and rolling impact to our economy. It's just too early to tell. What it does feel like is that business owners are probably a little bit more positive than we had expected. That said, that's not to understate the challenges and the really, really tough times that we're hearing from our clients every day. What we have also seen is a really marked shift from last week to this as businesses really considered the full impact of what's on them immediately. And in particular, many didn't anticipate the lockdown to happen quite so quickly. We are talking to some people who are not really thinking about beyond the next few weeks. And look, this needs a much wider lens and a longer term view of, thinking about the knock-on consequences to your business's customers, their suppliers. We'll cover some of these things shortly. For some, COVID-19's really amplified some underlying issues that they have, whether it's in their profitability or balance sheet, cash flow, and sadly, this may be the end for some of those businesses. We do see some taking an opportunity to pause, rebuild, and fix some things or rebuild some things that they hadn't had time to do. We're seeing a lot of that great Kiwi spirit, the number 8 wire mentality, just getting on with it and soldiering on through. But I think, Liz, you said to me last week, which really resonated, this isn't time for the Kiwi she'll be right attitude. It won't be okay if you don't plan. And look, we're also all dealing with imperfect information, and we were really feeling that about a couple of weeks ago when the stuff started to flow from government about the wage subsidy, some initial announcements from the IRD, there was some urgent legislation put through. To put it sort of mildly, it was imperfect, but now we're starting to see a lot more information flowing. And use your advisors to help you interpret the stuff and create clarity for you. You absolutely need to give yourself as much clarity so you can navigate through this as much as possible. One of the things that we feel, and I know a lot of our business clients feel, is there's a lot of pressure on us. We've got all these immediate things to deal with. We've got immediate issues. We've got to safeguard our own livelihoods, our employees, and hopefully be really playing a big part in getting New Zealand and our economy back on track. But don't lose sight of the fact that none of us have done this before. You're not alone, and be kind to each other. So this here is really focusing on some of the immediate challenges, and talking to our clients, many of you already are focused in this area. BAU secondary, you can't focus on absolutely everything. This is a crisis. You have burning issues that need focus. And given there's some talk about the length of this lockdown, it may be more of a marathon than a sprint. Really look after yourselves and your team. Stress levels for you, your teams will be really high. We see some great examples of communication from our clients, a really strong, honest, authentic, and realistic communication to their staff. And there's great ways to foster social connection. Friday drinks have gone virtual. Daily video catch-ups at a minimum, and give people some space. There's people have had a lot of personal implications. We've given our team a day off this week, just simply because they've been working pretty much 24/7 for the last few days, but they're not good to anyone if they burn out in the short term. What we are getting is a lot of questions about obligations to their team, and I know many of you will have been on the webinar earlier. Really, we're not specialists in this area, but we do say you need to operate in good faith, consult with your team, and you cannot make unilateral decisions that impact your team without consulting them. This isn't a time for that. That doesn't mean you can't act quickly, and you will have immediate financial pinch points, but you need to balance that with the need to take considered decisions. You might need to sleep on things, consult with people. You can do it quickly, but don't make knee-jerk decisions that will impact you potentially for some time. Defer any expenditure you possibly can during this initial period, but engage with your suppliers and your partners to understand the impact. We've seen some of the business clients that we have put their business on pause. They're effectively hibernating, minimizing any resources they're utilizing, and really operating with no new revenue for a period. Others are operating in a different way, really trying to bring in any revenue that they can through this period. Many of the questions we've got are about the government assistance package. So the general principle, and we'll send out some links on this as well as in our slides. The general principle is the wage subsidy is given to you on the basis that you intend to pay 80%. Businesses are unlikely to be penalised if you do make a best endeavours effort to pay. This is a very fluid situation. The government's also recently come out and said if you are unable to pay 80%, then at an absolute minimum, it must be passed on to staff, that the subsidy must. So that doesn't mean you can just drop your pay to 80% without consulting. We have seen a few people probably overthinking things a little bit and really trying to understand exactly what percentage they think they're going to be down in revenue over this period. I've said to some of those people, look, don't overthink this. You don't really know what the full impact is going to be. If it's probably 30% or more, apply for the subsidy, put it in a separate bank account, put it in your balance sheet, and if things turn out better, great, pay it back. Look, also bear in mind, this is the initial package, and we certainly expect and hope that there's more to come that helps businesses beyond this initial 12-week period. Now's not the time for big decisions or commitments. You don't want to fall foul of any of the reckless trading legislation. Won't go into that stuff too much here, but you need to be clear about your ability to meet any commitments that you're making and document. So don't make big decisions, particularly around your staff, without documenting these things. You're moving at pace. You can easily miss stuff, and that could be open to misinterpretation and leave you exposed in the future. So really just something to watch out for there. So really to help you manage your business as best you can through this immediate shutdown and the kind of initial impact of the fallout, it's about preserving your cash flow. You need to start with a really deep understanding of your financial position. And the strategy here is really to protect your cash. You need to be asking your accountants to support you with an integrated forecast. That's what you should be using to inform your decision making. Not just a cash flow, but you need to see the full picture over time and how this impacts your balance sheet and your P&L. For some business, that once I've dealt with these immediate issues, there are some opportunities. We see gyms taking their services virtual. There's lots of really cool, innovative ideas that people are doing to help take some of the opportunities there. Look at what your outgoings are, all your obligations, consider how you can reduce them and defer them, engage with your suppliers, understand their position. And one thing we're seeing is we are seeing a lot of logistics disruptions in client supply chains. So clients that may have essential services, for example, but they can't get a critical ingredient for their product, or they can't get their product imported into New Zealand. And we see some going to really extraordinary lengths, one in particular that's really poised, if they need to charter an Air New Zealand 777 to get their stock in from Sweden. So, really extreme example, but just goes to show the steps that businesses may need to take to keep their supply chains operational through this period. You need to consider what the shape of your team looks like. Is it reduced hours? Are you fully operational? Or will there unfortunately be roles that are made redundant? You need to consider that, but again, document and follow a proper process. We are getting a lot of questions about rent and how businesses can save rent costs, commercial rent in particular. You need to understand your contracts, and it's primarily a legal issue. There's lots of information out there. And again, what I would say is the key thing is just really engage with your landlords. Don't act unilaterally. And notwithstanding what people's contracts are, we do see people getting some reprieve from landlords, even if they're that's outside their strict contract terms. If you engage, explain the situation, there's lots of people and businesses really doing the right thing here to help each other out. Look, another question is about tax obligations through this period. Lots of confusion about penalties and interest. I think the IRD is being really pragmatic, and we've seen a real shift here. There seems to be a reasonable level of empathy for what businesses are experiencing. Basically, they're saying, if you can't pay your taxes on time, we understand. Try to contact us when you can, but we understand contacting the IRD may not be the top priority. When you do get in touch, they'll write off penalties and interest if it's COVID-19 related. But continue to file where you can your GST, PAYE, and potentially income tax returns. But that's something you also want to discuss the timing of with your accountant. If you have got a cash flow hole when you're thinking about all of these these outgoings and your revenues over this period, using your integrated forecast, there's different ways you can fund it. It might mean taking less out of the business as an owner, which might mean you then have to apply for a mortgage holiday, or you may be looking at taking more debt in the business. And this is something we're talking to the banks at the end of last week. The new loan scheme, I don't think is probably fully operational yet, but it's certainly something that our small business customers are looking at potentially utilising. So get yourselves ready to talk to the bank. Again, using that integrated forecast is probably the first thing they're going to ask for. Short-term cash is king throughout this period, and even if you do have cash, remember, if you are making a loss, you do need to fund it and consider the impact on your balance sheet. So your forecast, what impact does that have on your solvency of your business? Look, we're 1st of April. One consideration for us as accountants, and there's lots of people contacting us about this, is what about stock takes? Well, many won't be able to do a physical stock take. If you've got a perpetual stock system, take a snapshot of it now, get whatever records you can as at the end of March, but also work with your accountant to consider what's the best way to approach it and when you should be doing your year-end accounts. And look, the same applies to the company's office. They're not about to strike anyone off if they're late with their annual return and you miss a deadline, but file things if you can. So look, despite all of these huge impacts that we're seeing and the pressing and immediate challenges that you need to consider, there are the longer term implications, and you need to plan for them or you're going to risk being caught out. There will be a return, and that shape remains to be seen. We hope it's really fast, but it may not be. You need to take, again, I'm harping on about this, but having a really good cash flow forecast, start with that forecast based on a range of options, so you can really understand that the impact that it has on your accounts, your cash flow, your P&L, and your balance sheet. Look at your break-even points based on different resource levels. It's an iterative process. Consider how you then, tweak and refresh things over the coming weeks as more information comes to hand. There will be some sources of, hopefully, a business intel that we can use to help guide what some of those scenarios are as we start coming towards the end of COVID-19, and that may be some time. Look what happened in your industry following the GFC. Look overseas, where there may be some countries that are coming out of this before New Zealand. Although that said, looking at the experience in some of those other countries, they're going to have issues for some time. Really understand your most critical assets and resources. Your key people. Who are they? How are you going to hold on to them? Reassure your customers. Consider whether you need to diversify your supply chain and your customer base. And you need to understand how your suppliers are impacted. Understand their financial position where you can. We're talking about the need to potentially to support one of our key suppliers, because without them, it makes it really difficult for us to deliver. So we're looking at how we can actually potentially pay them a little bit more in the short term, just to help make sure that they can keep delivering to us over the longer term. And again, businesses will fail. And so people will be nervous about doing business as we do start to come out of that, about whether you can meet financial commitments. So being able to have really clear accounts that you can say, here's where we're at, reassure your customers and potentially other stakeholders about the strength of your business. Again, that forecast will come in really handy there. And look, while this last bit is probably not the burning issue for today, I know some people are already thinking about this. There will be some things that change forever as a result of COVID-19 and kind of a new normal, if you want to use those words, that eventuates afterwards. You need to think about, what will change, what has changed, and what do you see being the same? What are the underlying drivers that will probably remain the same? How will people be consuming things? And I think we've all seen, including ourselves, just a huge shift in the last few weeks to consuming things virtually. It's really easy to believe that's something that's going to continue and potentially accelerate. What about your operating model? Are you going to work from an office again? Or is this that kind of circuit breaker that you need to do things differently? We're looking at potentially how we could adopt a 4-day week. We've been talking about it for 6 months. But I think this is an opportunity for us to go beyond just talking and thinking about it, to really look at how we can implement it much more quickly. Look, the huge scale of government intervention in New Zealand, but also around the world, means things could be very different from a regulatory environment. And again, depending on your industry, you need to think about this. Now, Grant Robertson just indicated in the last day, generations of Kiwis will be paying for this economic recovery. That's highly likely that results in a really, really different way that we work with our government and the level of the intervention that they deem is required. Consider how this impacts your business. But more broadly than that, look, it's really an opportunity for you to consider as a business owner what you want your role in the business to be, and potentially even broader than that, what your priorities are, even in your life, and how your business fits within that. Feels like for many people, and probably including myself, that this is way too early to be thinking about these things, because we've just got so much burning stuff to consider. But you do start thinking about that over the coming weeks and months. Look, there is no playbook for this, and what you do need to balance is the need to take things one day at a time, deal with these burning fires as they come up, but give yourself the headspace that you really need to support you to plan for the future, and give yourself the really, really best chance of coming through this in the best possible shape. So look, that's, I think, a quick whistle stop to us through some of the things that we're thinking about in a framework that we're thinking about in terms of how we talk this through with our clients. So that's really looking at how things are, what the immediate crises are that they need to deal with. Beyond that, looking at how they maximize financial resilience in the short term through protecting their cash flow, really minimizing any costs through this initial period of the lockdown and the immediate consequences afterwards. Planning to come out of this, you do need to start planning for that and understand what that looks like for your business. And then beyond that, consider the bigger questions, potentially about how it fundamentally changes the shape of your business.